On today's show, the Caps have a goalie question and they need answers now.
Hey, this is Ryan Leonard from the Washington Capitals. Tune in to my favorite podcast, Lock On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dan Holmi. In today's episode, we talk about questions in net. We're going to look at Logan Thompson and the bigger question, because Thompson played 58 games last season. That's a lot of work. So if he's the guy again, who do the Caps trust when he can't play? A bit later in the show, we'll talk about Charlie Lindgren and Clay Stevenson. And this is where it gets interesting, because Lindgren is coming off a really rough season, while Stevenson just had the kind of year that makes you say, okay, maybe we need to see what this guy can actually do. But where we will start is a piece that I'm coming to you about that I didn't think I would come to. The Capitals signed Cal Petersen, a netminder, to a PTO. And I don't think Petersen himself is the story. The story is what the PTO tells us about the Caps' options in goal, especially with Stevenson already waiver eligible and coming off a much better season than the last time the Caps put him through waivers before. So let's get right into it. The Petersen signal. And I got to be honest, I was surprised when I saw that come through NHL media that the Capitals signed a netminder, a right-catching netminder, to a PTO. And the big takeaway here right out of the gate is the Petersen PTO doesn't prove the Caps don't trust Clay Stevenson. It proves they don't want to be boxed in by their current options. The Caps bringing in Cal Petersen on a PTO agreement. And when we take a look at it on the surface, I don't think it is a huge deal. And honestly, I think it makes a lot of sense that you are trying to have contingency plans. If Logan Thompson gets injured, if Clay Stevenson gets claimed on waivers, what does that mean for the Capitals? What does that mean for the Hershey Bears? That when you are a GM of a hockey team, you have to think 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of everything. And you don't put together a team that Chris Patrick put together this summer and say, oh, yeah, I probably should have thought about the questions in net. You really have to widen the lens there. So I do. I think it makes a lot of sense to add another goalie in camp. And you want competition. And to have someone who can give you some insurance if things go sideways. Petersen is no spring chicken, if you will, 31 years old. He's played 106 NHL games. And last season with the Iowa Wild in the AHL, he went 13, 16, and 2 with a 2.73 goals against average and an .896 save percentage over 33 games. He also spent the last 2 seasons playing exclusively in the minors. And a bit worrisome, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, about the future of Clay Stevenson within the Capitals organization. So we're not talking about some hidden superstar here. I really don't think that's the case. This is a veteran goalie coming in on a professional tryout. And I think it's a reasonable thing to do, because when you look at who else is in the room, you got Logan Thompson, of course, Charlie Lindgren, Clay Stevenson, Mitchell Gibson, and now Petersen. And it's one of the things I've talked about. I think there is a consensus among people that rate teams in their pipeline that I just rattled off: Clay Stevenson, Mitch Gibson, and now Petersen. There's Karen Bjorklund, of course, in that mix as well. That there are a lot of goalies, but not a lot of great goalies in the system, according to people that evaluate such things. But when I take a look at the goalie room, that's when I start paying attention, because the Caps have an unresolved question in goal. And I don't think this question is necessarily who is the starter. That is Logan Thompson. There is no debate there. The question is everything behind him. Because Clay Stevenson cleared waivers last year, and I thought the Capitals got lucky, but he put together a good season this past season here, and I don't think the Capitals will get that lucky again. And I think if we're going to read anything into the Petersen thing, is that the Capitals don't believe he will either. And this is the contingency plan that they need a guy. They need a starter down in Hershey. So this is where I want to correct something from what I hear a lot of people have said out there already. Clay Stevenson isn't suddenly becoming waiver eligible this offseason. He already was. He was last season. The Caps put him on waivers October 5th. In 2025, he cleared on October 6th. Then he went to Hershey and put together a good season. So this isn't some brand new roster problem the Caps just discovered. I just think that they realized what I realized, and I'm sure all of you realized, is they got lucky. I'm going to say it. The Capitals got lucky that Clay Stevenson cleared last year, but just based on what he put up this past year in Hershey and the need for great net minding in the NHL and the AHL, the Caps will not get that lucky. And they already knew that, and they've had to deal with it. And that's actually what makes this year's situation that much more interesting. Because Stevenson isn't the same goalie, like I said, he was when they put him on waivers last October. And that is the point. He cleared and that nobody claimed him. And then he went out and had a pretty damn good season. 37 games in Hershey, 18 wins, 13 losses, 3 overtime losses, a 2.62 goals against and a 912 save percentage. And then 6 playoff games, right, where he posted a 2.15 goals against and a 921 save percentage. Now, that is a different resume than the one he had with the Caps when they waived him last season. And, well, like I said, the Caps know that. They're not foolish. Their heads are not in the sand. So now they have to ask themselves a question again. If we waive him again, does he clear? Are you asking me? Oh, you're asking me? Absolutely not. I don't think that's the case, and I don't think the Caps want to risk it either. And that is why this Petersen signing is interesting, and I think is where I think the Petersen PTO makes a lot of sense, because there is a sense of that in the air. Not because it tells us the Caps are afraid of Stevenson. I don't think we have evidence of that. It tells us the Caps want to have options, and that's a smart thing. It's a good thing for the Capitals and Hershey, because if Stevenson wins the job with the Capitals, great, right? I've spoke about it for the longest time. If he doesn't, you still have Petersen. If Mitch Gibson isn't ready for a bigger role in Hershey, you've got Petersen. If somebody gets hurt, if Stevenson gets claimed, Petersen is ostensibly your guy. That is insurance. And I'd rather have the Capitals over-prepare here than get caught for nothing, right? That, you put a lot together. You want to plug every hole in the roof before the rainstorm comes. That will happen. I think that is what Chris Patrick is doing right now. He's up on the roof right now with some Flex Seal, and he's going over any hole where he might sense it's going to just really rain down on the Capitals if we get downpoured on. The Caps can't use Petersen as an excuse not to find out what Stevenson can do either. And that is where I want to draw the line, because Stevenson has earned the opportunity to compete. And the numbers are why. A 912 in Hershey matters, a 37-game workload, a 921 save percentage in the playoffs. All of those things matter. And then you add what happened when the Caps actually put him in the NHL net. And I get it's only a 4-game sample, 3 wins, 1 loss, a 2.00 goals against, a 921 save percentage. And, you got to stop right there. 4 games, I get it. But the things that I noticed is that he kept his pulse rate down. When things got crazy around him, he didn't get rattled. Sometimes with these young players, you can see them get overwhelmed by the situation. I sensed none of that with Clay Stevenson. But I'm not pretending 4 games proves Clay Stevenson is an NHL goalie, but he definitely deserves to fight for it. But it is 4 games that make me want to see 10. Not start Stevenson, Lindgren is done. I'm not saying that. Just give the guy enough of an opportunity to find out, because ultimately we already know that he can dominate in stretches in the American Hockey League. We know this guy can handle the pressure, and we know he got into an NHL game and didn't immediately look overwhelmed. And that's enough for me to want to see more here. And, I don't want to oversell it here, because I have to be fair here. Stevenson had an 888 save percentage in 24-25. So he hasn't been some unstoppable prospect climbing a perfect developmental curve. But in a league of what have you done for me lately, I am judging him on what he did last season. That I'm viewing that as more as development, not that it was a fluky season. But players do, right? They have bumps, questions about who they are, and that's normal. That is goaltending development, and that's exactly why the Caps shouldn't hand him anything. Make him earn it. Make Lindgren earn it. Underline. Make everybody in the goaltending tandem earn it. That is what training camp is for. And if Stevenson loses the competition, I'm going to have to be fine with it. We're all going to have to be fine with it because there is your answer. There is no ambiguity. But if he plays well and the Caps still don't have a serious look, that's when I start asking questions. So to wrap up segment 1 here, here's where I land on Petersen. The PTO is probably exactly what it looks like. Veteran insurance. And another option for the Capitals that they don't want to get caught short. But it creates an interesting situation because Stevenson has changed his value since the last time the Caps put him on waivers. He cleared last time, but that was before the 9-12 AHL season, before the 6 playoff starts, before the 4 NHL games where he went 3-1-0. So now the Caps have a decision. And I want them to actually make it based on what Stevenson does in camp. Because coming up next year, we're going to compare him with Chucky Sideburns, Charlie Lindgren, the outlaw. And, well, that is where the numbers get uncomfortable. That's where we're headed, straight ahead. Keep it right here. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is the one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working together toward the same goal. And that's true in sports just like it is in business. The one move that really stands out to me is the Capitals committing to Ryan Leonard, from the front office drafting him 8th overall to the development staff giving him a clear path, to Spencer Carberry trusting him with meaningful NHL minutes right away. Everybody was pulling in the same direction. You could see there was no mixed messaging. The organization identified a player they believed could be a part of the next core, and instead of rushing or second-guessing the process, they stayed committed to the plan. That's what alignment looks like, and it's a big reason why Ryan Leonard is such an important part of the Capitals' future. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. All right, welcome back into your Wednesday edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So, goalie questions. I'm coming to you on Wednesday, and I didn't think I was going to have goalie questions. In the back of my mind, I did. But I'm going to be honest, I did not see a goalie on a PTO in the Capitals' future. But in segment 2 here, we're talking about the trust gap. Because the big takeaway here in the second segment is Charlie Lindgren deserves the benefit of the doubt, but he shouldn't get unlimited benefit of the doubt. And let's start with Chucky here. 21 games last season, 9 wins, 8 losses, 3 overtime losses, a 3.52 goals against, an 879 save percentage, and a minus 5.29 goal save above expected. That's rough, right? To everyone that follows goalies, and there's really no way around it. That is the worst statistical season Lindgren has had as a Cap. Now, I'm not trying to bury the guy. I understand the context. Trust me, I know that Logan Thompson started more games, right? But with that said, Charlie Lindgren, maybe he didn't get as many starts because the Capitals weren't impressed with what they saw, right? And those are all things to consider as well. But your job is a backup. There's no battle about who the starter is anymore. You've got to be ready. But like I'm saying, I'm not trying to dunk on Chucky. I'm just saying what it is, because the Caps didn't just randomly give Charlie Lindgren a 3-year, $9 million extension. They signed him on March 3rd of 2025 after a good season. And there was reason to believe in him. There were seasons, especially when Kemper was here, where Charlie bailed the Capitals out. That the Capitals made it to the playoffs, and it wasn't for Chucky, they would not have. So I'm not trying to rewrite history here. And he's shown before that he can be a quality NHL goalie. So, I understand why the Capitals want to believe last season was an outlier, a red herring, if you will. I do, but here's the problem. You cannot assume the bounce back. Remember, in a league of what have you done for me lately, we need to look at last season. You have to see it. And for me, that's where Stevenson comes into the chat here, because while Lindgren was struggling, Stevenson was having a very good season in Chocolatetown. Again, 9-12 over 37 games. Then the NHL opportunity comes, 4 games, 3-1-0, 2.00 goals against, 921 save percentage. Again, I get it, a tiny sample. I'm not going to try to pretend it was something else, but it does create a legitimate question. If Lindgren struggles again, and maybe we won't know, that's the hard part, that he is going to have to totally fall on his face in camp in the preseason, that I don't think we'll actually know, to be clear here, because Lindgren, could look awful in December, in January, February, then it's too late. But that's the thing. If Lindgren struggles, why wouldn't the Caps at least find out what Stevenson can do? But there's a time limit, right? And that's why I'm asking. The contract doesn't get to make the decision. And this is where I think things can get a little uncomfortable. Lindgren makes $3 million per. Stevenson is the cheaper option. And I don't think the Caps are going to say, well, we paid Charlie $3 million, so he has to play. That is not the way pro sports works, right? You see that all the time. And baseball in particular, you gave this player all kinds of money and they just weren't it. Then all of a sudden, too bad. It's not that you paid these players money. They need to perform. And that's the big thing, because contracts create expectations. That you invest 3 years, $9 million in somebody, and naturally you're going to give that player a chance to prove the investment wasn't a mistake. You're not just going to put them right in the garbage can, the trash can. That's human. That's hockey. But there's a point where the contract has to stop talking and the performance has got to start talking. That if Lindgren plays well, great. Keep playing him. If he struggles, then don't be afraid to change it. Again, with a limited time sample. That's the hard part. That's the whole point. But when we talk about Clay, 4 games isn't enough to supplant Chucky. I don't think that's the case. And this is also why I don't want to oversell Stevenson's 4 NHL games. 921 is great. But 4 games is not a career. It's not even close. It's not even a season. There are goalies who look fantastic for 4 games and then get exposed. That's why I want to see more. Again, what strengthens my argument, however, is you couple that with the great season in the AHL, right? Maybe Stevenson gets 10 NHL games and the 921 becomes an 895, right? Okay, now I think we've learned something. Maybe he plays 10 and gives the Caps a 920 save percentage. Now we've learned something very different, but right now we don't know. And the hard part is there's not a great big window to prove yourself. And that is what bothers me. The Caps have a guy who have had a very good AHL season and a very good 4-game NHL opportunity, and we want to be excited. I am excited about Clay Stevenson. The answer shouldn't be to assume that he's ready. But with that said, it shouldn't be to assume that he is not. So what does the coaching staff see? And this is where, I really wish we could get inside the coaching room and Chris Patrick and Brian McClellan, no doubt, because, after Stevenson's first NHL win, Spencer Carberry spoke kind of what I talked about his composure and how difficult he was to rattle. And I think that message was clear, that Stevenson did not look overwhelmed by the situation. That is a something. And we've seen this before in a guy that maybe sounds a little bit familiar. Oh, Braden Holtby, right? Especially for a young goalie, because you're going to give up goals. You're going to get screened. You're going to have the puck bounce off somebody and have a night where you don't have your best stuff. But what matters is whether the next puck goes in. And that's the hard mental side of goaltending, probably the hardest position on the ice. And apparently that's something the coaching staff likes about Stevenson. So let's see here. The bigger issue, the elephant in the room, if you will, the Caps have spent this offseason making it very clear they're serious about getting back into the playoffs. When you add Tuck Kyrou, extend Ovechkin, this isn't a team saying, let's see what happens. They're trying to win right now. So I don't want the goaltending conversation to become, well, Thompson is good and hopefully Lindgren is better. That is not enough for me. You need to know what happens when Thompson isn't available. And that's why the Lindgren-Stevenson question matters. So to wrap up segment 2 here, Lindgren has the resume. He's got the contract and the previous success. And, well, I think he deserves a chance to bounce back. But he doesn't deserve to be protected from competition. And, well, Stevenson, he has earned the backup job. But he's also earned a real chance, or he hasn't earned the backup job, but he's earned a real chance to compete for it. And those are two completely different things. And now let's get to the biggest question. Because Thompson played 58 games last season, that is a lot. So if the Caps are asking him to carry the load again, who exactly do they trust when he can't? That's where we're straight ahead. Keep it right here. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you connect with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. One of the best examples for me is Logan Thompson. He wasn't the biggest acquisition the Capitals made, and nationally, well, it didn't generate a ton of headlines, but he ended up being exactly what the Capitals needed. The Caps needed stability and net, someone who could handle the workload and give them confidence every night. And Thompson delivered. It reminds me the smartest moves aren't always about landing the biggest name. They're about finding the right fit at the right time. That's what makes Indeed Sponsored Jobs so valuable, making organizations connect with candidates who fit all their needs from the very beginning. So that's why I love Indeed, and I know you will as well. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, welcome back into your Wednesday edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So talking about net minding and who do the Capitals trust in net when Logan Thompson is not ready to go? And can this room win? Because the biggest takeaway here in the final segment is Logan Thompson gives the Caps a strong foundation, but 58 games last season make the backup question even that much more important. So this is where I want to strip away all the drama. Forget Petersen and Stevenson. Forget Lindgren. Start with LT, Logan Thompson. He's the starter, and I don't think that is too controversial. Thompson played 58 games last season. He finished 31, 21, and 6, a 2.44 goals against, and a .912 save percentage. 4 shutouts, right? That is a pretty substantial workload. And I think it tells us something important. And what is that? The Capitals leaned on him a lot. That the Capitals got 95 points, missed the playoffs, but had it not been for LT, it would have been much worse. So when I say Logan Thompson is not the problem, that's not me saying he's going to win the Vezina. It's me saying the Caps have a goalie they trust enough to give a majority of the starts to. And that's a good thing. But, and it is a big but, 58 games changes the question. Here's where the number really matters, because Thompson played 58. So if he's going to be your guy, again, the question isn't can Logan handle the net? I think that he has shown us quite handily that he can. The question is, Who do the Capitals trust when he cannot? Who do the Capitals trust when they play a back-to-back? And that is the hardest part in the heart of this episode, because you don't want Thompson playing 70 games, right? Just because nobody behind him has earned the coaching staff's confidence. That is ultimately how you burn out a goalie. You need someone who can take, let's say, 20-ish games and give your starter a chance to breathe. And if Thompson gets hurt, you need someone who can take the net without everybody in the building panicking, right? You remember that playoff series, right? When we weren't sure if LT was good to go and it was going to be Charlie Lindgren. They're like, well, let's hope this works out. It wasn't the case, right? That LT was good to go. And that's where this goalie room gets interesting. You've got Lindgren coming off the worst season of his Caps career. You've got Stevenson coming off his best AHL season in a 4-game NHL sample. You've got Gibson still developing, Bjorklund still developing. And now the new guy, Petersen, is coming in with 106 NHL games behind him. Again, I don't want to oversell this either. It's still just a PTO, but suffice is to say that is a crowded room. But again, crowded doesn't automatically mean deep. Depth means trust. And that is ultimately what I'm watching, because what if Thompson misses time? That he has a track record of missing time due to injury. Because let's say Thompson gets hurt in February. The Caps are fighting to stay in the playoff hunt. The schedule, as we know, is brutal, where every point matters, right? Who gets the net? If it's Lindgren, great. That's why the Caps signed him, to be that backup. And if Lindgren has bounced back, nobody is going to complain. If it's Stevenson, also fine. That wouldn't mean Stevenson won the organization over during camp or during the season. That's development working exactly the way you want it to. But if the answer is yes, we're not really sure, that is where we have got a problem, because February, you don't want to be experimenting. You don't want to discover that your second goalie can't handle it. And you don't want to be, searching the waiver wire. You don't want to be calling around the league trying to find somebody. You want the answer ready. And that's why Petersen actually makes a lot of sense. And this is why I'm not angry about the Petersen PTO. I actually think it's smart. The Caps are basically saying, let's have another option. And that's a good thing. Maybe Petersen never plays a game for the Caps. Maybe he gets released before the season. Maybe he goes to Hershey. I followed this team a long time, and it reminds me back to when I thought that Braden Holtby was really coming into his own. There was Holtby and Michael Neuwirth, and it was a summer move, if I remember right, that all of a sudden Thomas Vokoun enters the building in the chat. We remember what Thomas Vokoun meant for the Capitals. But it was surprising to me then that sometimes in your mind, you have things sketched out a certain way, that it was Holtby and Neuwirth, and that seemed like a pretty good tandem. And then all of a sudden, Thomas Vokoun comes in. So it's interesting. But with Petersen, maybe he never plays a game for the Caps. Maybe he gets released before the season, or he goes to Chocolatetown. Maybe he had a great camp and makes the whole thing complicated. That's fine. That is what a professional tryout is supposed to do, create options. But Petersen doesn't solve the underlying question. He just gives the Caps another escape route. And the underlying question is still, do they trust Stevenson? And I think it's more complicated because they don't want to show Lindgren the door, right? That you heard LT speak glowingly of the relationship with Charlie Lindgren and the good vibes and and all of that. You also have the 3-year deal that he signed. That all factors in for sure. But Stevenson put just something in the air of doubt, like maybe we have a better option. But I think camp is going to tell us a lot. This is why I'm going to be watching this preseason workload, not just the results, the workload. Who gets the NHL heavy lineups? Who gets the tougher opponents? Gets multiple starts? Gets a second chance after a bad performance? Gets treated like someone who might actually play in October? Those things matter. That if Stevenson gets one exhibition game behind an AHL heavy lineup, I'm going to notice that. If he gets multiple games against NHL lineups, I'm going to notice that as well, because that's how you learn what the coaching staff actually thinks. The Caps have eliminated a lot of uncertainty. And here's the bigger picture. The Caps have spent this offseason trying to make the roster better. They're not hiding from expectations. They've added talent, size, and scoring. Ovi came back, right? They've made the moves that you expect to be playing meaningful games late in the season and, dare I say, the postseason. So goaltending is one of the last areas where I still have the question. It's not about LT. It's about what happens after Thompson when he's not ready. If Lindgren bounces back, the entire story gets quieter. If Stevenson takes another step, this has become a pretty good problem to have. If neither happens, then we're going to be talking about this crease a lot more in February than we are right now. So to wrap up today's show, so are the Caps ready in goal? I'd say yes, but there is an asterisk. The starter is good enough. The backup, well, the backup is the question. The internal option is intriguing but unproven, and the organization has added a veteran insurance policy because it doesn't want to get caught short. It's not a crisis. It's August, heading into September, but it is definitely something worth watching. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily Locked On Capitals podcast, and I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. Now on video, we send you to the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 YouTube channel. On audio, check out Locked On NHL for your second listen. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi, and I'll talk to you again next time.